I've known Tan for several years. Tan Huynh is a secondary school teacher specializing in English language acquisition. And he's an author, as he and Beth will probably say, is an author of a great book, as well as contributing chapters to the ESL, ELL Teacher Survival Guide. He's a podcaster and a consultant. His suggestions are rooted in his experience teaching students from 5th to 10th grade in public, private, charter, and international schools. So you're not going to find many teachers who've had that breadth of experience.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I have the honor of introducing Beth Skelton, who I've been learning from for years. I'm just so happy that the two of them are sharing about experienced multilingual learners today. Beth Skelton is a coach, a consultant, and an author with over 30 years of experience as a language educator. She has worked with multilingual learners ranging from the early years to adults in rural, urban, suburban, and international school settings. Beth is dedicated to equitable education for multilingual learners. And we are so lucky that the two of them are going to be sharing from the collaboration that they've done around experienced multilingual learners. So with that, without further ado, we will go ahead and let you two take it away.
We are super excited, and just to humanize us and to give you some visuals of what you just heard, I am a presenter, a coach, and a consultant. And Tanya can shift to the next slide. There it is. And I work with teachers all over the world now. I no longer have my own classroom. And when I'm not working with educators and their students, I am located here in beautiful Western Colorado. Tanya, if you can shift the next slide. It seems like it's moving a little slowly. This is my home, and I just got back from walking 40 miles from my home to Crested Butte, Colorado, with a backpack on my back, and came in for the Multilingual Summit. So it's great to be with you here today. Go ahead, Tan.
And so I'm currently in Laos, right over here, but I live in Cambodia, and this is what it looks like to be in Cambodia. This is my school where I co-teach a lot, in a lot of science classes, art classes, music classes, and when I'm not podcasting, when I play tennis a lot, and this is the man of my life. I just wanted to share with you to humanize you as well. I know that people are texting a lot, and I love it in the group chat. So if you have questions, please type it in the group chat, and if we can't answer it, the people in the room can answer, because the smartest person in the room is not us, it's the room.
Much, Tan, and you are lagging a bit, Tan. I don't know if taking your camera off would help. I know that's hard, but you're coming in and out. So we want to start with this term, who are experienced multilinguals? And to get an idea of what who we're talking about in this session, let's look at the whole umbrella of multilinguals. And Tan, we may have to change who's clicking through, because there we go. There's the umbrella of the multilingual learners. That includes all of those students who have been identified as English language learners. It includes dual language learners, who are considered our pre-K to K students, who are learning both in their heritage or home language and the school language of the school. There's those students who have another language at home, but when they first entered school, they were tested, but they were never classified as a language learner. So their English skills were at grade level or 5-year-old level. So that's the green box. So they have another home language. They're considered multilinguals, but they were never identified as a language learner. And then we have this group of students who are former English language learners. Those are students who at one point were identified as language learners and now are beyond, or they've exited the program. So we're going to follow that blue track down. And Tan, if you can click, we're going to follow those down. These students who were qualified for English language development services, keep following the blue down, and you'll see that there are a lot of categories under that part of the umbrella. We have what the federal government calls non-English proficient, which I hate. That's the NEP, the limited English proficient. And under that limited English proficient, again, a government term, federal government term in the US that I dislike, we have two main categories. We have these long-term English learners and these dual identified students that maybe they have language needs and special learning needs. That long-term, Tan, is where we are focusing today. That's who we would like to shift our language around and call these students experienced multilingual. So just giving you, where are we focused on today?
Great, thank you. Beth, if you can't hear me, please let me know.
You're good.
If this is better, perfect. So let's type in the group chat, everybody, where I'm going to ask you what words are associated with people who have dedicated hours and hours and years and months to achieving a goal, such as Serena Williams, who have started playing tennis at age 5, or Nicholas 14. He's the only. What are words that come to mind when you think about these people?
Great. And we're seeing people like committed, professionals, resilient, persistent, innovative, passionate. They're legends, they're tenacious, they're advocates, they're determined, they have a growth mindset. All of these terms, they're fierce, they're reformers, they're committed. All of these terms coming out with words associated with people who have dedicated lots of time to achieving a goal. Natalie, it is Tan's Wi-Fi, and Tan, you're in and out. So just letting you know what's going on our end.
Okay, not a problem. It happens when you live in a third world country. So let's look about the term long-term. When we think about that, we hear about some positive things, such as lifelong friendships and long-term investments. Yet when we work with multilinguals who have been in the system for a long time, we have negative terms for them, right? They're deficit-based, such as unmotivated, struggling, slow progress, low performing. So we're going to switch that to something else. But before we get there, we're going to talk about what's the language that we're seeing. It's, first of all, we're not working with kids who are beginners. In our particular book, students would say something like much bubble when we're talking about experiment. And the students who we're trying to work with are kids who would write this. There are more things when the light was brighter. Well, we're trying to get our students to do something like this kind of language. When the light increase evident bubble. Right? This is the kind of language to, yes, you know what, it's 2 years, acquire social long time to academic language, 5 to 7 years. So instead of saying long term.
So it sounds like Tan is no longer in the room, but basically this shift of who are these students that we're talking about who are currently in the field called long-term English learners, that we're saying these are experienced multilinguals. They have already acquired what Jim Cummins would call BICS, basic interpersonal communication skills. This is that language for necessary day-to-day conversation. They sound socially fluent. And that happens very quickly in about 2 years. And we're really focused on developing their cognitive academic language proficiency, that language that's necessary for class discussion and content. That's going to take 5 to 7 years with explicit instruction. That's what our book is focused on, and getting the students that explicit instruction. So where we're working is to get away from this deficit-based thinking about this group of students and move toward all of their assets, their experiences, that they already have at least one other language and cultural background, at least one. They're capable of learning grade level content if they're in a mainstream classroom with all the supports that we're going to share. They have lots of experience in English medium schools, so we don't have to teach them how to open their locker or use the cafeteria. And they can use their entire linguistic repertoire throughout the session. So this is who we're focused on and what we're really focusing on shifting in our conversation. So in the rest of the session, and if somebody could let me know whenever Tan has jumped back in the rest of the session, great. We are focused on an instructional framework for experienced multilinguals that looks like this. We're going to look at the second half, but we're using Jay McTighe and Grant Wiggins' backwards design, their understanding by design model, where you start with that end of the unit. We're calling it the orchard, like the forest through the trees. We're calling it the orchard because orchards produce fruit. So we first start with engineering a summative assessment to make it applicable to our students and accessible. Then we move on to each individual tree in that orchard, what builds to the final production. And that is where we're going to teach you in this session how to write an integrated objective that adds comprehensible input. Those are all the inputs like sun and rain that the orchard needs to produce fruit, so that you can finally structure that output, the fruit, structuring the academic language output. So in this session, we're really honing in on this part of the individual lesson, thinking that we already know where we're going in the big picture. Where's the end of the unit assessment? Now we're going in to this individual lesson. The lesson we're about to share may cause a little squeamishness, so hopefully your breakfasts are already done, but it comes from a 7th grade science group of teachers that I worked with, and we did this model, and so I'm sharing their work. Shout out to Mannheim Middle School in Chicago area. So Tan, go ahead and take over here now. You're back.
Sure, not a problem. I'll turn off my video so that you can hear me better. We are going to focus on chapter 4, which is about writing integrated objectives. Go ahead, Beth.
So we're going to start with this idea of writing the prompt. Go ahead.
Yes. So let's focus on here. I'm going to share with you a prompt. Can you click next? Let's look at the objective here. Learn about tapeworms. We have content, but there's no language in it. Can you click next? Perfect. Let's look at the next one. Write about tapeworm infection. So we have we have an objective, we have a language, what we're doing here, but there's English skills and there's content, but we're not sure what we're supposed to be doing with the writing. Next, please. Here is our example of an integrated objective. It's describe, which is a thinking verb, the interaction between a tapeworm and its host, which is the content. And what are they doing when they're describing? They're going to be using cause and effect sentence structure. Next, please.
So let's guide you through how we're going to do that. We will be modeling this and then having you type in the chat some of the ideas as well. So we're going to start with just writing a prompt, starting with this thinking verb. So the teachers that I was working with said, all right, at the end of this one lesson about interactions between animals, we're going to have them describe the interaction between a tapeworm and its host. So that was their exit ticket prompt. At the end of this lesson, we want students to be able to do that. All right. So once we wrote that, I said, okay, teachers, you write a model response. What would it be? What would it sound like if your very best student in the class wrote the most awesome 7th grade response you could possibly think of, and they sounded like scientists? What would that sound like? And so they wrote their own model response, and it looked like this. There's a negative interaction between the tapeworm and its host because the tapeworm attaches itself to the interior of the host's intestines. After the tapeworm is securely attached to the host intestines, the tapeworm begins to extract nutrients from the food eaten by the host. Yay. So they wrote this out and I said, awesome. Now we're ready for the second step of this. We're going to analyze the language. We're going to analyze that academic language in this response so we know what we might need to teach the kids explicitly. When we analyze the academic language, what do you think we should look for? Please type in the chat. For you, what would you be focused on? Drop in the chat any single words, phrases. What is it that we mean by analyzing academic language? If you're watching in replay, go ahead and take a moment now and drop your own ideas down, and then I'll read what's coming up. Excellent. Excellent. So in the chat, what's coming up is a lot of things like vocabulary, transition words, vocabulary, key academic terms, verb tenses. Some are saying science terminology, tier 3 words, words they may not know. Yes, vocabulary is one piece. And that is often what we think of with academic language. We're going to take it beyond that. And some of you are dropping it into the chat as well, like cause and effect. So clearly, academic language consists of vocabulary. That's one part, or the bricks. This architectural analogy or metaphor for academic language is from Dutroux and Moran from way back in the 2000s. And so we're going to use that as a visual as well. The vocabulary form the bricks to our house or our structure. But you can't just build a structure like an academic structure with vocabulary alone. Exactly. We also need to have that sentence structure, and that's coming out in the chat right now. So to put the bricks together, you need some kind of mortar. You need something that glues that vocabulary together. You can't have that structure without that glue. So sentence structure or grammar is also something we're going to analyze. Then we also need to organize those sentences into, the house with a roof and a windows and doors. So that's the organizational pattern, and we're going to have to look at that as well. And then finally, that structure, that house fits into a neighborhood. That's our context. Why are we writing this? What's the purpose? What's the bigger picture? So we're going to also look very carefully at context of any kind of writing. In this session, we're going to focus on the first two, just for the time frame of how do we analyze it and then teach it as well. So we might get to organization at the end. All right, so now that we've got what is academic language, let's focus in on the vocabulary. Please drop in the chat the words when you saw this and you said, oh man, I would have to teach this. Remember, these are experienced multilingual students that have been in our system for like 5 or more years. They have been in an English speaking school. What words, drop those in the chat, would you say I'd probably have to spend time teaching? And as you are watching at home, go ahead and do that for yourself as well. Great, the words are coming in right now. Interaction, host, tapeworm, intestines, extract. Oh, you are great. Nutrients, interior. This is brilliant. Excellent. Obviously, a room full of experts. And when you analyze that, and you can do the same process with teachers you work with, if you have the opportunity to co-teach, you would look at a model response. Now that you've identified those, blue words are coming up in the chat as well. Host, nutrient, intestine, those what we would call discipline specific. And that came up in the chat as well, really specific to this context of science. And what's wonderful is that a lot of the words that are also what we would call transferable academic words are coming up in the chat. And that is that bright green. These are words that you would see in social studies and in math, perhaps, and in language arts. That negative interaction, interior, the because, transition words like after and securely and extract. So these are the phrases that would transfer to other contexts. both blue words and green words on the screen are important for us to consider, because our experienced multilinguals might say inside instead of interior. They might say, instead of to extract, to pull out, right? So they would use language that's understandable, but maybe not as academic or science specific as we would like. So brilliant. That's the first step. We've analyzed that. And now we go into chapter 5 in the book, where we say, all right, how do we make those words comprehensible? I've identified them. I had my model response. Now, how do I make it comprehensible? There's so many ways to teach that academic vocabulary. And again, this is a quick chat. If you have thought of teaching these words, what kinds of strategies might you use to teach everything from tapeworm to extract? Just jot those in the chat. And again, if you're watching in replay, this is a great time to push pause and do that for yourself. How might you teach any of those words? Wow, look what's running up in the chat is, of course, visuals. I love it. A field trip. We've got games, images, a video, total physical response, mnemonic devices. Beautiful. Bringing in a metaphor like tape as a sticky for tapeworm. We'd use a Frere model, of course. And I knew this group would have tons of strategies for teaching academic vocabulary. Images, of course, we can use images. We can use American Sign Language or some kind of visual or gesture. This is the total physical response for words like a extract or attach. We can use translations and synonyms. So like interior is interior in Espanol. Con seguridad, we can show the cognates. So students are using all of their linguistic repertoire, and we can give synonyms for some of those words as well. So yes, cognates. So this is the teaching to make it comprehensible, but we don't just want it as input. We also need students to output that. So in chapter 6, we want to have them produce that fruit and sound like scientists. This is where we get into lots of strategies for helping students to output it. And it's already coming up in the chat. We want to create opportunities for students to use that key recurring vocabulary. So some examples would be, when something is extracted, it's removed or taken out. And now we're going to put it into a different context, a social context, that they can just use that word extract over and over. And then they can sound like scientists when they're talking about tapeworms as well, but they know that coal is extracted from the mountain, right? Or maple syrup is extracted from the tree. Oh, Cherry writes, my blood is extracted regularly. I'm so sorry. So we're giving them other contexts for using that language and outputting it. So there's also this idea of teaching it in opposing situations so they can more fully integrate the meaning of the word. When the seatbelt is securely fastened, right? What happens? Or when the seatbelt is not securely fastened, what happens? So we give opposing situations using that keyword. There's lots of ideas for how to support vocabulary output. Some of those coming up in our book as well. And that's the chapter 6. So after you have analyzed the vocabulary, of course, we need to analyze the sentence structures. When you look at this, and it came up originally, so I know we're in a room full of experts, what key sentence structures, what's gluing all of that vocabulary together that you'd say, you know what, I need to teach that structure? When you look at this, could you type in the chat, what are you thinking are the key structures, grammar in this model response? Yeah, Katie, it's complex, but what is it? Oh, Jenny LaRue is saying, if you're watching at home, Jenny's got, it's a cause and effect structure. Brilliant. That because there is some passive voice for the scientific language, cause and effect. Winona Roy, the book we're referring to is the one that just came out in May, and it's called Long-Term Success for Experienced Multilinguals. Tan and I wrote it, and we will give you a code for 25% discount at the end of this session. So if you're interested. So what I see a lot of people suggesting is that this cause and effect is really a very big piece of what's in there. And there's a lot of other options. But here's what I would say is that there's a negative interaction because, okay? So now we have an effect and the cause. The next sentence is a cause and effect, right? So you can have both options. Once we've identified that, yes, of course, there's sequence and all kinds of things going on, but that's the main idea here, is that there's a cause and effect. One is an effect and then a cause, and the next is a cause and then an effect. How do I teach that? Once we've identified it, and we want to output now the fruit, we want to get students to be able to use that cause and effect language. We want to teach the sentence structure. And there are lots of ways of doing this. Some of these we're going to mention directly in the book. Others, this is bonus for everyone who's here in the session. We're going to talk about question mirroring, sentence expansion, and sentence rearranging. So there's 3 structures that we're going to talk about here about how to help students actually produce those sentence structures. So if my goal is for them to describe the interaction between the tapeworm and its host, we encourage teachers to actually teach students to use that prompt to start their own response. Teach them to respond using the keywords. So they would simply say the interaction between the tapeworm and its host is, or there is a negative interaction between the tapeworm and its host. We teach them to use that question. I was in a 9th grade social studies teacher's classroom who had been through workshops with me. I watched as she had taught all of her class, everyone, English speakers, multilingual learners, experienced multilinguals of all levels, and every student in the class knew how to start their answer because she had taught this skill. So very basic skill that everyone can use to at least start their response. And when we start with that question mirroring strategy, it gives the students their own sentence starter. Do you notice we're not giving it the starter for them because they've learned how to use the prompt in their answer? Yes, Lydia, we borrow the question before adding their verbal answer. They can use that question and turn it around. Maria calls it turn the question around. There's lots of ways of calling it. We're saying question mirroring, turn the question around, but explicitly teaching this strategy. Because this book is directed for our math, science, social studies, language arts teachers who may not be the multilingual learner specialists in the room, we encourage you, ML specialists, to share this with your content area teachers, that everyone is teaching it. Now that the students have a starting point, we're going to teach them to expand their sentences in the sentence expansion strategy. And so in the sentence expansion strategy, the students might start with, there is a negative interaction between the tapeworm and its host. Yay, they use the mirroring or the R in race or all of those other acronyms that are popping into the chat. And they already got the start, but now we want them to expand it. Okay. And I would say, please expand that sentence with a because. So now they know I can expand this way because, and now they're adding their own ideas, the tapeworm attaches itself to the interior of the host's intestines. So we've just encouraged them to say, great, you've got the first part of the sentence because you used the sentence mirroring strategy or any of the other things that you call it in the chat. And now you're going to add the because part, okay? Notice the color coding. We're helping students that green is always the expansion or the language that we're working on, the cause and effect language. And the because now gives a reason for that first part of the sentence, yeah? So when we do it this way, kids are learning how they can write more scientifically, or as Katie Topol dropped in the chat originally, complex sentences. But we can also teach them to rearrange sentences. Most of our experienced multilinguals are great at putting the because at the end. But we can also encourage them now to start that sentence with the because. What would be the difference if they did that? Is simply flipping the sentence, adding the comma. We have to teach that explicitly because we started with because, and then refinishing off the sentence, there's a negative interaction. And we can drop that other part because it's already in the first part. So we teach them to actually rearrange their own sentences for complexity. If you are in a WIDA state, you know that one of the differences between a 4 and a 5 is this ability to use complex sentence structures. And part of that complexity is having an independent and a dependent clause, or even starting with the dependent clause. So this is a difference for many students in exiting the ESL program, or the English language development program that they're in. So these are 3 ways that we can actually teach students to expand their sentence level or dimension ability of writing and speaking. All right, so when we start with because, we have to have a comma. We're going to have students notice that difference and really put that in there. Notice it's bold and black, and we're going to teach it that way. So then again, we practice in a social context. So let's take it out of the science, get rid of the cognitive load, and let's just play with this sentence rearranging, the idea of starting with because July is a summer month, comma, type it in the chat. What might you finish that sentence with? And if you're doing this at home, it might not be July. So whatever month it is, you could finish it off. Because it's July, it's hot. Because it's July, teachers work without getting paid. Because it's July, we have time off. Because it's July, many teachers are relaxed. Because it's July, we all buy air conditioners. Because it's July, we all eat a lot of ice cream. I love it. That's so lovely. And if Tan has come back in the room, just interrupt me and let me know that he's back, so I can give him some voice in the session. There is lots going on in the chat. For those of you at home, this will give you a reminder about what July was like. Because it's July, it is a perfect time to go swimming. Indeed it is. And you can finish that with lots of ideas. So sentence starters and frames, they do help students, but they just help students finish their ideas. So it's a great place to start in a content area classroom, just to get them thinking about the content and reducing that cognitive load around how do I even start. But the writing prompt itself, when we start a writing prompt with that verb like describe, justify, compare, when we start with one of those verbs, those writing prompts help students know what ideas to communicate. Am I describing something? Am I justifying something? Am I informing you of something? What is it I'm doing with those ideas? But the difference is that those two don't actually teach students how academic language is structured. And what we just presented are some ideas of actually teaching students how to structure their responses. And that's what chapter 6 in our book is all about, is how do we teach them to output? So we want to make sure they comprehend the input in chapter 5, and in chapter 6, how do we then support that output? The other part of academic language that I really just wanted to provide a few ideas on is this organization level or dimension. In the organization, to make sure students understand the structure, we actually want to do something of like annotating a mentor text or annotating that text. And that annotation can go beyond just the content, the vocabulary meaning, but also how is this structured? We can say, notice that the first part identifies the interaction. The next part explains why the interaction is negative or positive. And the last part states an effect. And look at the color coding there. We can actually teach students to check organizational patterns as well. In our first session this morning with our fabulous presenters on all of those tech skills, they mentioned ChatGPT. And I use ChatGPT in this way. I will have them, ChatGPT, generate a response for my prompt. And then I have students actually go in and look at the organizational pattern. How did it start? What is the next thing that happens? What is the next thing that happens? And if you put in a prompt with describe or compare or contrast, if you put in one of those verbs with your prompt, ChatGPT comes up with several different, you can say reorganize or do it a different way. Now students can look at the organizational patterns because the pattern is there in every one of the responses. They get to determine, I see how my response should look. And it's not so much now about the vocabulary or the sentence structure, but just the pattern of response. Brilliant way of using ChatGPT. Now they've understood that input of how the organization comes together. How do we help students to output that organization? And in this session, this idea is you could create a sentence or a discourse frame. So there's a blank kind of interaction between, because, and then after the. So this is something that students can also learn to create themselves and build their own sort of structure or frame. So hopefully that gives you some ideas of how to really support students at the organizational level. In the book on page 171, we have for each of the main thinking verbs, narrate, explain, inform, and argue. Again, if you use WIDA in your international school or in your state, you know that these are the big 4 language functions. There are example organizational patterns that students can learn. So anytime that I am asked to do some sort of information, like describe as a part of inform, I have to identify the topic, introduce the features, describe the features, and summarize the topic. And if they have those patterns, then they're able to take that into any content area. And it's really just giving them some support in organizing their own writing, later outputting it. So what we just did here is write that prompt, analyze the language in your model response to your own prompt, and now you can create that integrated objective that we started with. You can start with the thinking verb, add your content, and add your language expectations so that it looks like this. Here's my verb for the prompt, describe the interaction between a tapeworm and its host by using cause and effect sentence structure. Clearly, I could have said by using the content words in a word bank or by using an informative organizational pattern. But the teachers in the room that I worked with said, no, my students need to learn that cause and effect sentence structure. That's my focus. There's no right or wrong, but the language focus helps the teacher know what to teach and the students know how they're going to produce it. And it really gives them a boost in succeeding as a scientist, as a mathematician, and sounding like one. Maria, you can take our color coding if you want. A lot of teachers are saying that that verb is so essential, the word describe. I know that Larry Ferlazzo teaches the International Baccalaureate program, and many of you in international settings here know about the IB program. These are called command terms. And if students know what that command term is asking them to do, their answers are so much better. So it's really focusing in on the language of that term for this output. It's the thinking verb, we're calling it, just so that it's not only for International Baccalaureate. We have a content and we have that academic language expectation. Jenna, they're also called language functions. Absolutely. And Tan and I debated so much about what we were going to call them because all these different terms out there. And sometimes for teachers that are in math or teachers in science, when I say the word language function, that it kind of feels linguistic and they get a little concerned. So we chose thinking verb just to make it not so linguistically heavy. What we just shared with you is right here. And if Sherry, you have that link on the document, if you would drop that in, this is the instructional framework that we walked you through this first part, how to write that integrated objective. The second part is how we're going to scaffold the input, like all those ideas of how do I make the vocabulary, the sentence structures, the organizational features comprehensible, and then how do I support students with output. That's basically the whole instructional framework that you can share with teachers you're working with, any of your content area teachers. Thanks so much, Sherry, for dropping that link in the chat. We really walked you through this first half and then added bonus from chapters 4 and 5 of the input and the output. We have a giveaway. So Carol has so generously given the opportunity for one person in the chat. Carol, who's our lucky winner?
Yes, it is Jessica Oliver.
Jessica, if you would email me, the email is there on the screen, ellbeth@bethskelton.com. If you would email me, I will make sure that Corwin sends you a copy of the book. Congratulations. For those of you who didn't win, you are also winners. There is a link to my website that Sherry is going to drop in the chat for me. And that I have as listed a 25% discount all the time for anyone. The book on Amazon is $37.95. It is on my website at $30. So please order that way. There were some people that were saying that it's taking a long time for Corwin to send the book. No one has had any issue. They get it within a week running through my website. So I would encourage you to do that. It's maybe faster than Amazon, who can't seem to keep it in stock for some reason. So thanks for dropping that in the chat. I appreciate it. So that's our book. For everyone gets the bonus 25% off. Here's another exciting opportunity. Currently, Katie Topple's book is in an MLL chat book club, and she is next. So this is very exciting. You get to hear from our next summer author. And her book with Jana Anchavarria is coming up in the ML chat. Tan and I are doing our book study starting in mid-September, and we're doing it as a live MLL chat book club. So the live MLL chat book club is different because on Saturday evenings, don't you want to hang out with us on a Saturday evening, right? So we are going to be live online. It'll be like a quick 45 minutes of like back and forth. We're going to be chatting with each other. Tan and I will be there answering questions. We're going to be talking to you live. So rather than the slow chat that the typical MLL chat has been, we're going to do it live. Hope that you can join us. You can jump in at any time, any of the chapters, all along the way. We would love to see you. So that is coming up, which is super exciting. And what we tried to do in this session is really what Brene Brown talks about, that clear is kind. We want to be super clear about what we are giving to our students and asking them to do, both from the content and the language perspective. Kara, I am so sorry that my voice was the only one, because Tan is my complement. He is my complementary relationship, and I missed him terribly. He is in Laos right now and working out of a place with less internet connectivity than I think he had hoped for. So thank you for just bearing with me and being the only one here today. We like to close with this frame that farmers and gardeners know: you cannot make a plant grow. However, you can create the conditions for that plant to grow. And we really would love to help you. And we hope that this book helps you provide the conditions for that growth. And thus the theme and our metaphor about the orchard and plants and creating conditions for plants to grow. It has been such a pleasure to be with you here today. I thank you for your patience with tech and just hearing my voice after Tan had to drop off. Thank you so very much to Carol and Tan and Katie and Larry and Sherry for hosting and making this MLL Summit work. We appreciate you so very much.
We appreciate you so much. You know, Beth, I think even Tan's tech issues, it's a testament to when there's good collaboration. I don't think there are any educators in the field who don't know what it is to have a lesson and then tech doesn't go right. But you were able to just pick up your colleague's part and present amazingly because of all the work that you guys did. And I bet you did some of it asynchronously.
So we wrote the book completely asynchronously. Tan lives a 14-hour time difference from me. So everything was either through Voxer or Google Docs or Zoom meetings, very early in the morning for him and the afternoon for me. And yes, we have a collaboration that is a time and space difference by a lot. So
yeah. And it doesn't, there are no barriers to collaboration. And there are no, I mean, look at the product. If one of us has to get it, if my co-teacher is sick, a lot of the collaboration that I did was just around the copier because that's when I could catch them or through email. And so it was a fantastic session. We appreciate all the work Tan did into it and hearing his voice at the beginning, and you gave a fantastic session. And if people really want to interact with Tan, you've got the September book chat coming up. We recommend highly that you plug in September to MLL Chat Book Club for sure.
And Tan is very, very accessible through Twitter and other sources as well. And who among us have not had the internet go down in the middle of our lessons, right? So
it actually honors us. You know, we all give grace because that's how, and we still got amazing content. We really appreciate it. I keep putting back in the chat. I'm going to put it one more time. And if you're watching it in replay, all of these links will be on the ML Summit website right next to this video. The lesson planning template, the slides that they used, and the discount code for Beth's website to get the book faster and cheaper. So we appreciate you all so much. Thank you again. Thank you. And Larry, thank you. Is there anything, Larry, that you would add to your reflections to this? Experienced multilingual learners. I already was in Bastrop, Texas, and my the director that I'm working for there said, you know what, this year we want to use the term experienced multilingual learners. And I was like, oh, I know where you got that from. And yes, we all need to be doing that from an asset lens. Thank you. Larry,
yeah,
what
it's great.
takeaways?
It's great stuff. I mean, it's oftentimes, and I speak for myself as a ELL teacher, sometimes we set the bar a little too low for ourselves and to our students in terms of just focusing on the basics. So it's great to get ideas and tools for all of us. And for me, I'm speaking for me, I can up my game based on some of the things that I've learned from Beth and Tan.
100%.
Larry, we learned so much from you, and you're our inspiration. Like I said, you're one of the few out there that are teaching in the IB situation in the US in a public school where you know that high level of expectation for our experienced multilinguals, and you're making it work for them. Thank you.
Well, we've got a great mutual admiration society, not only between the two of us, but I suspect through most of the people in this Zoom. We're all doing our best under sometimes difficult circumstances.
Absolutely. So thank you for sharing. This summit takes away any barriers that anyone has for quality professional learning. There is no barrier in time. There is no barrier in cost and collaboration and community. Those are the kind of things that we want to make sure that it doesn't stop anyone from getting great PD. So we appreciate you. We can't do it without these amazing presenters like Beth and Tan. Thank you.